Speaking of California, I mean, one of the biggest stories that have come out of California in the past couple of decades is, of course, Charles Manson and the murders and that happened in 1969. I don't know if you've heard, if this is the first ounce of news you were listening to this morning, Charles Manson is dead. He died last night at Kern County Hospital. He was 83 years old. Wall, you covered the story. We all covered the story this morning, but you have more of the details on just what his impact was the last however many decades, and him being gone today. What does that mean moving forward?
That was a scary time back then, because the 60s was like a real loss of innocence. You had JFK shot, Bobby Kennedy shot, Martin Luther King shot, all killed. And then in 68, 69, specifically 69, you had this Manson stuff going on where, for no reason other than they're just helter-skelter crazy, they're not only killing people, they're stabbing them to death. I mean, stabbing is a very personal way of killing people. Normally in stabbings where there's domestic, stabbings are like a crime of passion. It's hand to hand. I mean, it's not like you could shoot somebody from 50 feet away and walk away. Stabbings is a different, worse vibe in many ways. So here they are just randomly picking out people, and over the course of several days, and then it was a while before they were apprehended. And this was this psycho drug. We're just gonna, like I said, Manson was heavily affected by the Beatles' Helter Skelter album, which was a real counterculture album at the time. But it was scary. I mean, And how did a guy like this?
He never killed anyone, murdered anyone himself.
He never got dirty.
Orchestrated
He never got dirty in any of this. Any of the stuff that he was involved with, which was hands-on, would have been, some armed robbery, some petty crime stuff. But he got these women and got them under his influence, and he got them to do all this stuff. And it's just like, really? Wow. Well, how did that all happen? And that really scared the American public back then, and that made a lot of people kind of check their own families as to, wow, really? You've been listening to that Beatles album a lot. You're not going to go out and do something like this, are you? So it was a different time. It was a different time.
The fact that he had been locked up for so many years here in California, around the Bakersfield area, right? Corcoran, which is a high-profile prison. I've always been intrigued by the story, and as someone who came into this world decades later, I was an intern at KBC 7 down south. This is the only connection I have to the story, but I remember that's when I realized how big of a deal he was, not only in our state, but in our culture and in the world. And there was a sign at the assignment desk, so it's right there. If Mason, you want to turn the camera to show what an assignment desk is, it's where all the news comes in firsthand. Just real quick right there. You can come back. That's it. But that's
so no news today.
No news today. There's no one up there.
That's what I do when I'm not on camera, doing the camera.
That's what Mason does when you man the desk, right? So there was a sign that said, if a Charles Manson calls, be sure to hand the phone over to your boss.
That's so weird, though, that they would post. I mean, was he capable of phoning in periodically and wanting to talk?
He was known for doing that.
No kidding. That's
in
interesting.
Los Angeles, yes, at KBC, and I don't know if he was just messing with the minds of the people or what it was, but there must have been something before I was an intern that happened to an intern or something for them to put a sign up. But
yeah, we're not accepting his phone call from Corcoran Prison. It's some guy named Manson. And then you hang up and, no.
He would do interviews. I mean, he was available. I mean, people did interviews with him, and that was always sort of a big moment in the news was the parole hearing. And everyone would point to that as being, this is the moment when our prison system and our justice system fails us if he ever gets out on parole or if it's upheld. And he would have hearings and he would always just sound crazy. But you know what? Back in the day, it was enough to convince those women to do those crimes.
And some of these women got out on parole. There are a couple of them are out, and one has been paroled. Leslie Van Houten's been paroled, granted parole by the parole board, but the governor is yet to sign off on it, so she waits. But there are, and she was involved in this stuff. She killed the LaBiancas a couple of days later, and so she's. I guess the government takes into effect that they were highly influenced by this guy, and that's enough for her. Been a model prisoner. I mean, there's no question that, once she figured out who she was and what she had done, she's certainly gone the right path. So maybe she'll get out, maybe she won't. I don't know.
Chi Tran says he claimed himself to be Jesus, but himself couldn't escape death. Interesting.
Not that
we allowed him to live
we thought that he was Jesus.
Not that we thought. He perceived himself to be. And then didn't he say, all? Did I hear it right when I heard him say, oh, all men are Jesus?
He said that.
Okay.
He said a lot of things. I think
just to get our minds.
One of the things about his legacy is it shows the power of persuasion, because it's not just him. You know, you have Jonestown, you have all these Branch Davidians in Texas, in Waco, Texas. There are certain individuals that, through the way that they speak, through the way that they carry themselves, exactly, they are able to form a cult, and they can get these people to do anything. I mean, the whole Jonestown thing that happened is absolutely horrific. They can convince people to take their own lives. It's happened many, many times, and I think that that's one of the things that, you know, that he's passed away. The threat is still out there that there could be a new individual like this that could then convince men, women, and children that they are the way forward, and listen to them and nobody else, because there will be future Charles Mansons out there. There really will be.
He certainly appeared to those who followed him to be prophet-like.
Yeah.
And, you know, like you said, Robin, I think that was well said. You're always going to have people out there who are looking for someone or something to believe in. And Manson just totally fit whatever it was they were looking for. And
do you think
scary.
he would be successful today?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, people.
In the same way, with knives and the stabbings and all of that?
I don't know how that all translated to him having followers and living on this ranch. Tex Watson was involved in this, and they were out in some old movie set. So I don't know how it got from that to you need to go stab people to death. To what end? I don't know. But there are certainly people who are living on the margins who would be attracted to someone like that who has a persuasive rap. I think that's very possible. It's probably going on right now.
A lot of people saying, oh, he lived too long. Now this is saving us tax dollars. We don't have to pay for him up in prison anymore. What's your response to that?
Well, when you're on death row, it's very expensive for the state. You know, there's built-in appeals in California, and you know, you're there basically forever. And I forgot, it escapes me. I didn't know you were going to ask me this. How much it costs per year to pay for someone who's on death row? But it's very expensive.
It is. You know, you hear that come up a lot. And Charles Manson has that everyone was so familiar with his case, so we're all convinced that he's guilty and, you know, and should suffer the consequences. But there are people on death row that occasionally do get out and are exonerated, and that's why you have the appeals process, because on occasion people are wrong. And so it does happen. I mean, we don't need to be convinced exactly because we're familiar with this case, but it does happen. Rarely, but it does happen.
I would say, to your point, Rob, with the advances in science and DNA, that we've seen probably more of that very, very rarely, where some evidence will come in and somebody who's on death row will be exonerated due to how science is now. You know, 10, 20, 30 years ago, if you're on death row, you're not, unless somebody comes forward and said, yeah, I lied about it, he wasn't the one that did it. Nowadays, you have that aspect, and then you also have science, which is getting better and better, which is not only getting people off of being sentenced, but it's also getting people on death row who should be, and who have not been on. So
I'm reading here there are 714 inmates on California's death row. Cases without the death penalty cost $740,000, while cases where the death penalty is sought cost $1.26 million.
Yeah, it's not. It's just another thing in California. You know,
maintaining each death row prisoner costs taxpayers $90,000 more per year than a prisoner in general population.
Yeah, there's the added protection and isolation, and death row is for the worst of the worst.
All right. Well, I know you guys have things to say, and most people are saying, thank goodness he's dead. Some are saying, Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving. Charlie Manson is gone.
He's been out of the public for a long time. He hasn't been a threat. This is just the ceremonial ending of the whole thing.
Marcy Ways says, cut open his brain, see how different it is. There are some people that want to know, you know, was there something different in his mind for him to commit such a heinous, not that he committed those crimes himself physically, but to orchestrate that. Is this something that you think is scientific behind it?
I don't know. I mean,
or is he just a crazy guy?
I mean, but you can't just say he's crazy and it just dismisses the whole thing like there's no curiosity. So I understand that wanting to learn more about it, but I don't know if you'd be able to see something physical in there. It's probably more
I would say you
chemical,
probably.
or who knows?
You think you could?
I think you probably have nothing to lose. I don't
Right.
know if they have access to that, if Manson said you can do that. But if they were to open him up and find something completely wrong with his enzymes, and that's something that maybe down the road they have people that they find who, before they
With
commit
some,
heinous crimes, that if they take a certain DNA
IQ test or
balancer,
something,
it could prevent something from happening down the road. If they found something in Manson, like, whoa, this guy needed a lot more something, and then they, I don't know. I don't see any downside to opening it up. It's almost like with the CTE concussion.
But they can only find out when one is dead.
I think they tested somebody the other day in football that they did something, and they determined that they were able to test for the concussion syndrome stuff prior to you passing away, although the best exam obviously is post-death.
Posthumously, yeah.
Posthumously.
All right, well, keep sounding off. We will keep track of that.